With 3.1 billion citizens, China is the most populous country in the world. This means that every sixth person on Earth is considered to be Chinese. There is no accurate number of China's LGBT population, but the most common estimate is that they represent 5% of the whole population, which is 70 million. China has a history of over 5,000 years. Even then, many ancient leaders felt attracted to the same sex. The emperor of the Han Dynasty had a favorite male companion whom he was very close with. When his partner fell asleep on the emperor's sleeves one day, the emperor carefully cut off his sleeve instead of waking him up. Thus, breaking the sleeve became a synonym for homosexuality. China highly values Confucianism with a major focus on family and social harmony. This philosophy cultivates a culture of don't ask, don't tell. However, silence does not mean tolerance and acceptance. Homosexuality was classified as a crime until 1997 and as a mental illness until 2001. Gay rights activists were arrested by the authorities. In 2013, the government banned homosexual content from movies and TV. Today, many media still define homosexuality as abnormal or perverse. The so-called converse therapy, a treatment where gay people are promising to get straight and acceptable to their parents, still remains widespread. In China's conservative society, people face huge pressure to get married. However, same-sex marriages are still illegal. This is why gay people need to find compromises and get caught in cooperative marriages. In most cases, their heterosexual partners don't even know their secret. The numbers are alarming. 80% of the 20 million gay men in China are currently or have been married to a straight woman. The wife would usually choose to keep silent after discovering her husband is gay to keep up family stability. However, some women find the courage to get divorced, but the majority faces social embarrassment in a traditionally conservative nation. Hello and welcome to the CVA News today.
Hello, have a good day.
In general, there are various problems related to a marriage of convenience. We defined two most important issues that contribute to the fact that homosexual people see a cooperative marriage as their last resort.
These days, there is a huge lack of all embarrassing sex education in schools and universities, especially regarding gender diversity and LGBT. Many institutions don't even provide sex education problems at all. Instead, students are merely taught the basic anatomic differences between males and females, most commonly from untrained teachers. More details are learned through other channels, including Friends, adult movies, or even pornographic websites.
Well, mostly the primary school and middle school and high school. This is what we call this kind of the period of essential education for Chinese people, that we had courses, kind of education for students. They taught us. So, for example, how should we look at our body, and how, what are the names of these bodies, and how you experience, for example, those, the female, they would experience, the period that Irma is visiting. So how would you deal with such situations, and how, let's say, for male students, deal with the first time that they jerk off, if I'm allowed to say this term. So don't be terrified about this, and explain, why it is something like that. So I think we had some kind of discussion in the university, in the primary schools and high schools and middle schools, that the students learn a little bit of knowledge about that. But it's not the mandatory, and it's not the mostly emphasized aspect of education, I would say, in my experience.
Taking a close look at the overall society as the second issue, it is obvious that
due to the deeply rooted philosophy, The younger generation is socially pressurized to get married and produce offsprings that continue the family line. Being put under pressure from the families is the main reason why homosexual people still live in the shadows, with only 5% of them willing to live their diversity openly.
I think there are various reasons. So I think one of the reasons that people would engage in such kind of marriage is that they want to not to disappoint their parents. So of course the relatives and friends, and they also suffer from this very severe pressure that the traditional value that you have to find a girl, so in my case, and get married and have kids. So I think this kind of a faked marriage is the result of this suffering from the pressure, and also being afraid of the pressure, and also want to meet up these expectations from their parents. So I have heard about cases that some faked marriage being discovered by the parents, and then it turns out to be a very tragedy, and stories that I learned. So I've heard about this, to answer your question.
This can become problematic, especially when considering the one-child policy in China. It is quite likely that a gay son or a lesbian daughter is the only child, and thus the only one who can continue the family line.
The lack of sexual education, as well as the conservative society, continue to the fact that gay Chinese hide behind a cooperative marriage to keep their secret.
One way to prevent cooperative marriage, for example, between a straight woman and a homosexual man, is to implement a civil union for homosexual partners. A civil union is a legally recognized arrangement similar to marriage. It provides unmarried same-sex but also opposite-sex couples rights that are almost equal to those of a marriage, such as inheritance, hospital visitation, medical decision-making, taxation and adoption, as well as employee benefits for partners and dependents.
Civil union is usually established as an alternative for those countries in which the homosexual marriage is still illegal. After the legalization of the homosexual marriage, the civil union is usually replaced.
In many European countries, the civil union is quite common, and it means that gay couples basically have nearly the same legal rights as heterosexual couples, especially for adoption and taxation.
Civil union can be a tremendous advance in the struggle for equal treatment of same-sex couples, because it not only protects the well-being of the homosexual partners, but also respects and benefits them.
The civil union is kind of a pre-step for the marriage, which should be implemented shortly after or a few years afterwards, and not just gives legal benefits to the gay people like adoption of children and taxation, but it also shows the respect of the society to gay people and makes them equal to heterosexual people.
Referring to a gay marriage, the attitude of the Chinese government is characterized by 3 no's: no approval, no disapproval, and no promotion. It is considered to be quite difficult to modify the marriage law, since it will initiate a sequence of changes in the law. The legalization of homosexual marriage has always been regarded as a threat to traditional values and social harmony. This is why different proposal and same-sex marriage bills have already failed in 2003, 2005, 2006 and 2008.
I have thought about going to a country that issues same-sex marriage certificates and getting married there in a couple of years. It might not mean much in China, but for me it's really a big deal.
Taiwan's recent ruling in favor of same-sex marriage has given hope to gay couples that China could someday follow suit.
Legal-wise, there are hardly any differences between a marriage and a civil union. As with traditional marriages, civil unions allow couples to manage taxes, share insurance policies, ease access to residence permits for foreigners, or make partners responsible for each other's debts. But Why it is so difficult for the People's Republic of China to recognize same-sex marriage, while accent China had relatively more tolerant policies towards same-sex relationships.
One explanation is that the greatest challenge is not the constitutional grounds, but rather social hurdles. Traditional Confucian culture, the government's ignorance of the existence of lesbians and gays in China, and the general mass social views of homosexuality or same-sex marriage. Looking at other countries legalizing same-sex marriage, there is usually a high degree of visibility of LGBT people before the marriage is ultimately legalized. This is not the case in China.
While Taiwan has already taken a big step towards marriage equality for LGBT people in its Count ruling, China is far behind of the gay rights movement. The case of a judge that ruled against China's first gay marriage in 2016 is considered as a landmark movement for the country's emerging LGBT movement.
你好，现在心情怎么样？还不错，还不大概如意。那不如意的意思就是这个直接就已经是败诉了吗？你们会再争取上诉吗？会争取。
Legal scholars and gay rights activists already came up with different approaches to legalize same-sex marriage in China. For example, by adopting international treaties and recognizing same-sex civil unions as a first step towards approaching same-sex marriage. Compared to a marriage, this kind of arrangement is much more flexible.
One advantage is the easy handling when it comes to a separation. It can be dissolved much more uncomplicated with just a registered letter instead of divorce formalities. The only limitation to mention is that civil partners do not have the right to adopt an unfamiliar child, while biological children, for example, from previous relationships, can be adopted ordinary.
Even though the social conditions are not quite ready for legalizing a same-sex marriage, by implementing a civil union as a first action, the country will definitely make one step into the right direction. The history of the one-child policy's implementation has proved the fact that Chinese citizens can and will accept a law that is against their cultural beliefs, but serves social well-being. This is why we propose an implementation of the civil union to shape public opinions and encourage supportive views towards same-sex relationships. The idea is to implement the civil union in Shenzhen first, serving as an experimental area.
First, Shenzhen is a modern metropolis that links Hong Kong to China's mainland. The city's spectacular economic and physical growth led China to create over a dozen more similar areas. Benefiting from its strategic position next to Hong Kong, Shenzhen has the largest per capita income of any city in China. Shenzhen's population of over 10 million people is what makes it such a unique mega city. With more than 90% of its population are people aging from 15 to 64 years old, Shenzhen has a comparatively energetic working and living atmosphere than any other cities in the mainland of China. An increasing number of people choose Shenzhen as a place to settle because of the city's job opportunities, as well as the culture's tolerance and open-mindedness.
With a free economic environment, the government of Shenzhen has a positive policy in attracting young talents to work and live in Shenzhen, which in turn creates a comprehensive society for LGBT people. Shenzhen, as a young city, has an open-minded culture which ranks it among one of the top LGBT-friendliest cities in the mainland of China. All these points make Shenzhen the best choice to implement the civil union policy as an initial step towards the legalization of homosexual marriage.
According to the German lawyer, an implementation should be without any problems.
The legal system in mainland China is the same as in Germany, and therefore you could kind of copy the German code for the civil union to make the implementation even quicker. As a new law has to pass the parliament, the whole procedure would take between a few months up to a year to implement the civil union into mainland China. The effort of money would be relatively low, I think, because as mentioned before, you could just copy the codes from European civil law countries.
Reflecting all the problems and solution approaches, it is obvious that in the long run, something has to be changed to prevent fake marriages. As previous studies suggest, teachers and parents are identified as the two most trusted entities in the lives of children and young adults, especially for educational purposes. This means that China needs to implement mandatory sexual education classes, in fact nationwide, especially focused on the LGBT group.
Well, I think it's definitely a yes. I think it's necessary for the schools and also for universities. I think for the high school, primary school, middle school, all this we call it basic education. So the sex-related education has to be included in part of the core courses.
Teachers need to be trained to be comfortable and skillful in providing comprehensive knowledge. Textbooks of sex education need to be improved and edited, eliminating prejudices and adding objective explanations of the LGBT groups.
Finally, by implementing a civil union, for example, as a measure to prevent fake marriages, China could strategically secure its social stability, enhance its overall economic performance, as well as improve its human rights reputation, as the country has been criticized for its unsatisfying performance on human rights protection in the past.